Marguerite Fontenot had driven to the hospital intending to walk into the emergency room and say the words her therapist had told her to say if things ever got this bad. But she had sat in the parking lot for 6 hours instead, paralyzed by shame and fear, unable to move, her husband gone, her job gone, her mother dead, the thoughts of ending it no longer scaring her and starting to feel like relief, which scared her more than anything. What happened after a biker named Kendrick Oyalaran trusted his instincts and pulled into that lot, after he tapped on her window and listened without judgment, after he told her about his own darkness 20 years ago and the stranger who had saved him, and after he walked her through those hospital doors because nobody should have to drown alone, proved that sometimes the only thing standing between someone and the worst decision of their life is a stranger who refuses to look away, and that the help you receive is meant to be passed forward, one window at a time. Kendrick Oyalaran had been riding motorcycles for 33 years, and he had learned to trust his instincts. He was 56 years old, a retired postal carrier who had spent 3 decades walking the same routes, knowing the same faces, watching neighborhoods change and people grow and lives unfold in the small moments between mailboxes. He had developed an eye for when something was wrong, when a house that usually had lights on was dark for too many days, when a face that usually smiled was hollow, when the rhythm of ordinary life had been disrupted. That instinct was what made him pull into the hospital parking lot that Thursday evening. He had been riding back from a club meeting with the Midnight Suns MC, taking the long way home because the weather was good and the road was clear. The hospital was not on his route, but something made him turn in. Maybe it was the car he had glimpsed from the road, parked in the far corner of the lot, alone where no cars should be at that hour. Maybe it was the stillness of the figure inside. He rode closer and saw a woman behind the wheel. She was not moving, not looking at her phone, not eating or drinking or doing any of the things people did when they sat in parked cars. She was just sitting there, hands in her lap, staring at nothing. Kendrick parked his motorcycle a few spaces away and watched for a moment. She did not react to the sound of his engine, did not turn her head, did not move at all. He checked the time. It was almost 8 in the evening. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lot. He wondered how long she had been there. The hospital security guard was a young man named Terrell, and he was worried. He had noticed the car around 2 in the afternoon, when he did his first sweep of the lot. A silver Honda Accord, parked in the far corner, a woman sitting inside. He had figured she was waiting for someone, maybe a patient being discharged, maybe a family member finishing a shift. But 6 hours later, she was still there. Same spot, same position, same unnerving stillness. Terrell had thought about approaching her, but something held him back. What would he say? What if she was fine and he was just being paranoid? What if she was waiting for someone who was dying inside and he interrupted her grief? He was standing near the entrance, debating what to do, when the motorcycle pulled in. The rider was a black man in his 50s, big and solid, wearing a leather vest covered in patches. He parked near the silver Accord and sat on his bike for a moment, watching the car with the same concern Terrell felt. Then he got off and walked toward the window. Hit subscribe if you believe that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is knock on a stranger's window. Comment where you're watching from, and share this with someone who needs to know that being seen can save a life. Kendrick approached the driver's side slowly. He did not want to startle her, did not want to make whatever was happening worse. He had learned from his years as a mail carrier that people in distress needed gentleness, needed to feel safe, needed to know that the person approaching them was not a threat. He stopped beside the window and tapped lightly on the glass. The woman did not react at first, Then, slowly, she turned her head to look at him. Her eyes were red from crying. Her face was pale, drawn, the face of someone who had been wrestling with something terrible for a very long time. She looked at Kendrick like she was seeing him from very far away, like she was not quite sure he was real. Kendrick spoke through the glass. He said his name was Kendrick, said he was just passing through, said he noticed she had been sitting here for a while and wanted to make sure she was okay. The woman stared at him for a long moment, then her face crumpled. She rolled down the window, and the words came pouring out. Her name was Marguerite Fontenot. She was 42 years old. She had driven to this hospital 6 hours ago, intending to walk into the emergency room and tell them she was going to hurt herself. That was the plan. That was what her therapist had told her to do if things ever got this bad. Go to the hospital, ask for help. Do not try to handle it alone. But she had not been able to get out of the car. She had parked, turned off the engine, and then sat there, paralyzed by shame and fear and the crushing weight of everything that had brought her to this point. Her husband had left her 4 months ago. Her job had laid her off 3 weeks after that. Her mother, the only family she had left, had died in February. She had been swimming in grief and loss and financial terror, trying to keep her head above water, and she had finally gone under. She had thought about ending it, had thought about it a lot, had thought about it so much that the thoughts had stopped scaring her and started feeling like relief. That scared her more than anything. So she had driven to the hospital, intending to ask for help. And then she had sat in this parking lot for 6 hours because she could not make herself walk through those doors. Could not make herself say the words. Could not make herself admit that she had failed at everything, including staying alive. She told all of this to Kendrick, a stranger in a leather vest who had tapped on her window and asked if she was okay. She did not know why she was telling him. She just could not stop. Kendrick listened without interrupting. He had learned a long time ago that people who were hurting needed to talk more than they needed advice, needed to be heard more than they needed to be fixed. His job was to stand there, to witness, to let her know that her pain was real and it mattered, and someone cared. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised her. He said he understood, said he had been in a dark place himself 20 years ago after his daughter died in a car accident. Said he had sat in his own car in his own parking lot, thinking the same thoughts she was thinking, feeling the same pull toward an end that would stop the pain. He said what saved him was a stranger, a woman at a gas station who saw him crying and came over to ask if he was okay. She had not known him, had no reason to care, but she had noticed, she had approached, she had interrupted the spiral long enough for him to catch his breath. He told Marguerite that he was doing for her what that woman had done for him, passing it forward, honoring her kindness by offering the same to someone else. He asked if Marguerite would let him walk her inside. If you're enjoying this story, hit that hype button right now. It's free, takes a second, and helps this video reach more people who need to see it. Now back to the story. Marguerite looked at him for a long moment. The shame was still there. The fear. The voice in her head that said she was weak for, needing help, that she was a burden, that the world would be better off without her. But there was something else, too. Something that had cracked open when Kendrick told his story. The realization that she was not alone. That someone else had felt what she was feeling and had survived it. That survival was possible. She said yes. She would let him walk her inside. Kendrick opened her car door and offered his hand. Marguerite took it and stood on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. She had been sitting for 6 hours. Her body was stiff, reluctant, but she was moving. Kendrick walked beside her across the parking lot. He did not hold her arm like she was fragile, did not treat her like a patient, just walked beside her like a friend, steady and present, letting her set the pace. The security guard, Terrell, watched them approach. He held the door open without a word, his face full of relief and gratitude. He had been worried about her too. He just had not known how to help. Kendrick walked Marguerite to the emergency room reception desk. He stayed while she gave her name, while she said the words she had not been able to say alone. She said she was having thoughts of hurting herself. She said she needed help. The receptionist responded immediately. No judgment, no hesitation. Within minutes, a crisis counselor appeared. They took Marguerite to a private room, away from the noise and bustle, somewhere safe. Before she went, she turned to Kendrick. She asked why. Why did he stop? Why did he tap on her window? Why did he care about a stranger in a parking lot? Kendrick said, because someone did it for him once, and because every person deserved to have someone notice when they were drowning. If Bike Diaries has become part of your week, consider joining the channel membership. Just a couple bucks a month keeps these stories coming. Links below. And hit that hype button if you haven't already. Now back to the story. Marguerite spent 3 days in the hospital's psychiatric unit. It was not what she expected. She had imagined something out of a movie, cold and clinical and humiliating. Instead, she found a quiet ward with private rooms, nurses who treated her with kindness, and a psychiatrist who listened to her story without making her feel broken. She was not broken. She was overwhelmed. There was a difference. The psychiatrist adjusted her medications, which had not been working well since her mother died. The counselors helped her create a safety plan, a list of people to call and steps to take when the thoughts came back. They connected her with resources for the financial stress, organizations that could help with rent and job placement. By the time she was discharged, Marguerite felt something she had not felt in months. Hope. Not the naive hope that everything would be fine. The realistic hope that she could survive this. That there were people who would help her. That the darkness was not permanent, even when it felt like it would never end. She walked out of the hospital on Sunday afternoon with a folder full of resources and a heart that felt lighter than it had in years. Kendrick was waiting in the parking lot. Marguerite stopped when she saw him. He was leaning against his motorcycle, arms crossed, watching the hospital entrance like he had been waiting for her, which she realized he probably had. She walked over to him, not sure what to say. This man had saved her life, had interrupted a spiral that was leading somewhere she did not want to go, had tapped on her window and refused to let her disappear. She asked how he knew she was being discharged today. Kendrick smiled, said he had friends who worked at the hospital, said he had been checking in, said he wanted to make sure she had a ride home, since her car had been towed from the parking lot on Saturday. Marguerite had not even thought about her car, had not thought about anything practical. She had been so focused on surviving each hour that the logistics of her life had faded into background noise. Kendrick said the Midnight Suns had taken care of it, had paid the towing fee, and retrieved her car from the impound lot. It was parked at the clubhouse, safe and waiting for her. Marguerite started crying. Again. She felt like all she did was cry now. But these were different tears, grateful tears. The tears of someone who had expected to face everything alone and was discovering that she did not have to. Kendrick drove her to the clubhouse on the back of his motorcycle. It was the first time Marguerite had been on a bike, and she was nervous at first. But Kendrick was a careful rider, taking corners slowly, accelerating smoothly, making sure she felt safe. By the time they arrived, she understood why people loved this. The Midnight Suns clubhouse was a converted warehouse on the edge of town, with motorcycles parked outside and music playing inside. Marguerite felt out of place, a middle-aged woman and rumpled, clothes surrounded by bikers, but no one made her feel unwelcome. Several members came over to introduce themselves. They had heard about her. Kendrick had told them the story, and they wanted her to know she was among friends. A woman named Celestine, who turned out to be Kendrick's wife, brought her food and coffee and sat with her while she ate. Marguerite learned that the Midnight Suns did a lot of community work. Charity rides, fundraisers, mentorship programs for at-risk youth. They had a reputation in the neighborhood as the people who showed up when help was needed. Kendrick was one of their most active members. She asked why. Why did they do all this? What did they get out of it? Celestine looked at her with eyes that had seen their own share of darkness. She said, because everyone needed someone to show up for them. Because nobody should have to sit in a parking lot alone, thinking about ending it all. Because the world could be brutal, but it could also be kind, and they had chosen to be part of the kindness. Marguerite stayed connected to the Midnight Suns. In the months that followed, she got her life back on track, found a new job, not a great one, but enough to pay the bills. Started seeing a new therapist who specialized in grief, rebuilt the routines that had collapsed after her mother died. But she also found something she had not expected: community. The Midnight Suns became her people. She was not a rider, had no interest in motorcycles, but that did not matter to them. They included her at cookouts and gatherings, checked in on her when she missed an event, celebrated when she hit milestones in her recovery. Kendrick and Celestine became like family to her. Not a replacement for the family she had lost, but an addition, a new branch on a tree she had thought was dying. They had dinners together, went to movies, talked about everything and nothing, the way people did when they genuinely cared about each other. Marguerite started volunteering with the club's community work. She did not have much to give, but she gave what she could, helped organize events, made phone calls, showed up when showing up was what was needed. And one day, she found herself in a hospital parking lot again. Not the same lot, a different hospital, in a different part of town, but the same situation. A car parked alone in the corner, a figure inside who was not moving. Marguerite walked over and tapped on the window. The woman inside was young, maybe 25, with tears streaming down her face, and the same look of drowning that Marguerite recognized from her own reflection. Marguerite introduced herself, said she had noticed her sitting there, said she wanted to make sure she was okay. The young woman broke down, told Marguerite her story, a story of loss and despair and the crushing weight of a world that felt like too much to carry. Marguerite listened without interrupting. Then she told the young woman her own story, the parking lot, the 6 hours, the stranger in the leather vest who had tapped on her window and refused to let her disappear. She told her that she understood, that the darkness felt permanent, but it was not, that there were people who would help her if she let them. She asked if the young woman would let her walk her inside. The young woman said yes. Marguerite walked her to the emergency room, stayed while she checked in, stayed until the crisis counselor took her somewhere safe. Before she left, the young woman asked why. Why did Marguerite stop? Why did she tap on the window? Why did she care about a stranger? Marguerite said, because someone did it for her once, and because every person deserved to have someone notice when they were drowning. Thank you for watching this story about a woman who sat in a parking lot for 6 hours without moving, and the biker who tapped on her window and changed everything. It was inspired by the real moments when strangers intervene, when people choose to notice, when a single knock on a window interrupts a spiral that might otherwise end in tragedy. If you see someone who seems to be in crisis, Do not assume someone else will help. Do not assume they want to be left alone. Approach gently. Ask if they are okay. You do not need to have answers. You just need to be present. If you are struggling yourself, please know that help exists. The 9988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available by phone or text 24 hours a day. The crisis text line is available by texting HOME to 741741. You are not alone, even when it feels like you are. Subscribe to Bike Diaries. Hit that hype button to boost this video. And if you want to support what we do, the membership link is below. Share this with everyone who needs to remember that noticing someone is the first step to saving them, and that the help you receive is meant to be passed forward. Marguerite Fontenot is 46 now. She works as a peer support specialist at a mental health clinic, helping people in crisis navigate the same darkness she once faced. She has tapped on 4 more windows since that first day in the hospital parking lot. Kendrick Oyalaran is 60. He still rides with the Midnight Suns, still watches for cars parked alone in parking lots, still trusts the instincts that have never led him wrong. He and Celestine have been married for 34 years. The young woman Marguerite helped that day is named Simone. She is 29 now, married, mother of a toddler, working as a nurse. She has tapped on 2 windows herself. The cycle continues, because that is how it works. Someone saves you, and then you save someone else. The kindness does not stop. It just keeps moving, from one person to the next, one window at a time. If you are in a dark place tonight, please hold on. Someone is coming. Someone will tap on your window. You just have to stay long enough to hear it.